I have this interesting history with Americo Life Insurance Company, and I feel like a
hmm
lot of people do. Do you use them? What's your perspective on Americo?
Well, I'm not going to say there's never a utility for them. I know that they have good rates for like smokers, right? But there's a couple things that kind of tick me off about them. Number one is they'll like actively try to churn the bottom 10 or 20% of your book. Like they'll just call them and cut them off. I guess it's a risk assessment on their part. I don't know if you've noticed that, if you've done high volume with them. But the other thing is it's just not, a comparable product to other things in the market like, Mutual of Omaha or American Amicable. Like if you just compare apples to apples, you're probably getting better rates, better coverage, better terms inside of the fine print with the other products. And so, I think a lot of people like to use it because it's a quick decision. They can get paid fast. I had one guy, he was writing like 600K a year, and he's like, man, I keep having a bunch of business fall off. It's like 90% sticks with Foresters and 50% sticks with America.
Today's guest is the owner of Ace Systems and has a really cool Facebook group, Seven Figure Team Building Secrets for Life Insurance Agents. Mr. Nick Early, thank you for joining me today.
Awesome. Thanks for having me on, Doug.
Absolutely, man. So let's jump in. Tell us a little bit about what you do for insurance agents and insurance agency owners through your company, Ace Systems. Life insurance agents, if you'd like 20 life insurance appointments on your calendar every single day, all set by the clients themselves who expect to speak with you about burial life insurance, or if you'd like a copy of the free new agent remote sales file, lots of killer sales materials here. Email me at doug@ufesonline.com or just click on the link below in the description.
Yeah, so essentially we're a consulting firm. So I go into quite a few areas, mainly related like business strategy, social media is kind of the biggest thing people know me for, and then IUL sales, specifically like National Life Group, how to do banking. I don't get too much into annuities, but we'll do some advanced market stuff, basically sales training, lead generation. So those are kind of the main areas aside from just recruiting and marketing campaigns there. But within those areas, I like to zoom in on essentially brand, messaging, and positioning. Like if there's a zone of genius, that's kind of what it is, right? And so one way to think about it is we train people on copywriting for like their Facebook posts, for ad copy. Even when you're DMing somebody, it's essentially copywriting. Like you still have a structure to, what you're trying to communicate with somebody, the storytelling elements, how you kind of grab someone's attention. And so I try to develop that skill set in people and train them how to like find talent, how to manage that talent, how to bring those type of systems internal into their company. Because those essentially, if you can, as an insurance agency owner, as an IMO, even as a singular agent, if you can take more responsibility of the marketing department for yourself, then you'll be able to produce more results. Even if you like doing outsource stuff, you'll have some of those procedures that you can follow to get better performance. And so it's related to that area essentially. There's not a lot of things that I won't turn over within that.
Well, this sounds like some advanced stuff. With that being said, I'm curious, how do you feel about these life insurance agencies that are still pushing, like direct mail leads or age leads, or the shared leads on their independent insurance agents?
And like the main thing with that is I'm not going to say that it can't work. Like obviously it's worked for years, but I think the biggest kind of shift that I have people make, which it's partially like a mindset shift and then more of like an activity shift, is that you want to be working qualified leads, right? Like if you don't have to spend all your time selling to people and you just sell the people that should buy, you can get almost all of your time back to put into training your people or developing the marketing strategy, the materials for the marketing, all the stuff that people try to say they don't have time to do, right? And so I'll just tell people like draw a line in the sand and put your marketing qualified leads in a different bucket than your sales qualified leads. And so, not that an aged lead can't be sales qualified, but, essentially you got to be able to hit your list with different levels of priority and understand what are the components that make up, someone being a stronger lead or a higher priority versus another one, which that could look different for an organization depending on what they primarily sell and kind of what stage the agent is at in their business. But the main thing is that I just think that it's going to die off. There's a lot of new laws and things that are coming out all the time. They're kind of cracking down on the ability to even get away with buying leads and stuff like that. But I think the biggest sin that I would say is what I'm kind of getting at was separating those marketing and sales qualified leads, is that if you spend all your day trying to chase people that you can't get on the phone, or they're going to be kind of rude to you on the other side of it, you don't have much time left to spend on the right opportunities. And so it's more like if we can get into the mindset of always marketing and trying to generate that demand and awareness inside of the marketplace, whatever you're doing, that local, online, whatever, that you have more opportunities to sort through. And if you know how to do that, you should be able to pretty much cherry pick who's going to become your client out of the database, right? And so they can work. I still am a believer of like the first thing that an agent should do is probably like hammer the phones, really get used to how people are going to respond to them in general. Like if you don't have any sales skills whatsoever, probably you don't need to worry about marketing on like day one. But I'm gung ho of like the first few weeks into the business, learning a little bit about the basic structures of marketing, right? So that you can kind of run your business the way that you want to run it, right? So I don't think that a shared lead is necessarily bad. I'm really big on the idea that you want to do what's best for the client. And so if you can come behind somebody and do better than them, which I think that's the one thing in this industry that, like, if you get in front of something and you're educated enough, you've had some training on this stuff of what's a good product, what makes a good solution for somebody other than just selling a policy, you should be able to make an improvement to anyone's stuff. It doesn't really matter what they have. Like, I would imagine the people that follow you and me, they're not like, intentionally, doing something worse for somebody than, what they can. Right. So I think a lot of it is just, can you beat someone to the punch? Like the speed to lead thing matters a lot whenever you're buying leads or whenever you're running your own marketing campaigns. And the second thing is even if the competition beats you to it, if you can do a better job than them, then it should be all right. And so there's no, wherever people are at in their journey, I didn't have a lot of money when I started out. So like sometimes you got to do things, that you don't want to do. And I think that, I told somebody a couple of weeks back, like they were making these excuses about buying leads or whatever. And I was like, man, what if you just like door knocked random people in your local area on the weekends and you worked 1 or 2 days out of the week as hard as you could to make enough money to afford the lead batch. And then you could run the core strategy that you would want to run the other 3, 4, 5 days a week. And it may not sound ideal. It's kind of another version of like, get out there and hustle. But I mean, it does work. Like you can make 20 grand in a day. You find that one family where you write a policy on everybody. If your mindset's locked in, you can see those kind of opportunities and you're always looking for the way out. It's not going to be conducive for results. So that was kind of long winded, but a lot of it has to do with mindset and sales strategy and not just like, how do I get more leads, right?
Yep. And look, I started out door knocking leads. So I never did any cold door knocking, but back, when I did the face-to-face, the door knocking the leads, people were doing the core, that daily. I remember one company I went to, they were like, well, every Saturday we all go out to this one neighborhood and everybody goes out and just knocks on doors. That was part of their training. It was actually very smart. I just feel like today with what we have, the technology that we have, even if you can't use it, you can find somebody who can help you or run ads for you. And now you're getting the ads at a fraction of the cost as like some of the old systems. Look, I mean, back when I was selling, direct mail really, without it, I probably wouldn't be where I'm at today. But using direct mail, leading with direct mail as, let's say, a final expense agent, especially if you're only selling final expense, the ROI is just not there anymore. You are not where I was able to make $200,000-$300,000 a year. The agents that are good working direct mail, doing final expense, they're not making $100,000 a year. It's just not a reality nowadays. Now, I saw a post on your Facebook group about this $10 IUL sales strategy. Tell us about that.
Okay. So there's kind of two ways to do it, right? The first one is I partner with this guy. You may know him. His name's William Thurman. So he wrote this book. He goes by Liam, the Babe Ruth Bucket. And this is a business card book. I mean, there's typos and stuff in it, right? But it was never meant to be an Amazon bestseller. But it doesn't have to be a book. It could be an ebook. It could be, a magazine. I know Reminder Media does some cool stuff, right? But essentially, you take that thing with you and you kind of get that agreement from somebody that they're going to read the book and you're going to pick it up later. And, maybe they keep it if they become a client, but you take the book back if it's not. So that's one thing that like anybody can do. You don't have to be fancy tech wizard or anything like that. You just grab a stack of books. Of course, there's more advanced ways to get into like digital landing page and shipping stuff out and driving awareness around the topic. So then it doesn't have to be somebody else's book. It can obviously be their book. They can write one with ChatGPT if they really want to, but that's one piece to it. The other thing is I recently came out with kind of a beta test of a program where I take people through some DM strategies they can use on LinkedIn and Facebook. And it's essentially, at a fraction of the cost of what I normally working with somebody at, just to get some people some wins, I'm starting to scale my company and go for more awareness and visibility in the marketplace. So essentially, I know for sure this process works. I booked 47 life insurance appointments in 2021 with it before I started teaching it to other people. That was in a week. I think I ended up writing like 18 policies with F&G off of that.
Wow.
And I think that the social media stuff works better for like IUL and annuity. There's a little bit more juice for the squeeze, but I would argue somebody that doesn't have any leads whatsoever, they're kind of just like, they're really not sure where their next client's coming from. I mean, you can send messages to people unlimited on the social media platforms. That may not be the case in the future. They may crack down on it a lot. So I think that there's a lot to be said about, just put the work in. It's kind of the same as making the dials. Like I look at social media as it's the same thing as the dials, only you don't got to sit on the phone and wait for if you're even going to get a response, like somebody's either going to respond or not. There's a limited amount of things that can happen when, on the back end of a DM message, right? And we can kind of get into that. But essentially, it's a program I put together. It's just a quick, short little, hey, dissect these modules and then start to execute on the strategies in them. And, I figured, hey, if I can get somebody a client for $10, they get to see my materials good. Maybe they'll buy something else from me.
Awesome. All right. Let's switch gears a little bit. I have this interesting history with Americo Life Insurance Company, and I feel like a lot of people do. Do you use them? What's your perspective on Americo?
Well, I'm not going to say there's never a utility for them. I know that they have good rates for like smokers, right? But there's a couple things that kind of tick me off about them. Number one is they'll like actively try to churn the bottom 10 or 20% of your book. Like they'll just call them and cut them off. I guess it's a risk assessment on their part. I don't know if you've noticed that, if you've done high volume with them. But the other thing is it's just not, a comparable product to other things in the market like, Mutual of Omaha or, American Amicable. Like if you just compare apples to apples, you're probably getting better rates, better coverage, better terms inside of the fine print with the other products. And so, I think a lot of people like to use it because it's a quick decision. They can get paid fast. I had one guy, he was writing like $600K a year, and he's like, man, I keep having a bunch of business fall off. It's like 90% sticks with Foresters and 50% sticks with Americo. How can I double my business? I'm like, stop selling that one. What is this decision making process when you choose to write that one over the other one? Well, I get paid faster. I'm like, man, you got to have some other, you got to have some other thought process than that.
You lose money.
I get it, but it's also like, business is really, the acquiring clients is the first kind of domino to knock over, but then it's about retention and systems and getting your time back. I mean, I was talking to a girl yesterday. She had this kind of limiting belief around, being a single mom, and she only had like an hour a day. And I can resonate with that. I got four toddlers. But the thing is that I told her, I was like, hey, I can give you a strategy of what I would do if I only had an hour a day. But the reality is even if you had 12 hours a day, like some people do, you're still limited on your time, right? And so you got to build a system to get you out of that. And I think that, I'm kind of getting off track of the Americo stuff here, but you want to think like that in general. You don't want to just think about, the first, what you consider like the primary consequences. You want to think about secondary and tertiary effects of any action that you take, because it does tend to add up to those things, even if you don't see them right away. And when you have a product that's likely to churn 30 to 50%, like any agent can come behind you and do a better job. The client can find a better rate, on the internet somewhere. I mean, you're setting yourself up to get a chargeback. And I've been saying this a lot lately, is like, if we're buying leads and 20-30% of our budget is going to buying leads, and then 30 to 50% of the business falls off, and we got to spend our time, chasing the clients down, you're basically working half the day for free. And so I know a lot of people that are trying to get out of the final expense business because they see that writing on the walls, and it is probably the best place for a new person to start. But and then, of course, you can scale your business on final expense. You get a bunch of agents and all that, and you protect your spread. But I think choosing the carriers you're going to use is extremely important from a business model standpoint, not just servicing the client, not just lead generation, not just getting paid quickly. And so you got to factor in all those decisions when you're looking at what should your strategy be for the quarter or whatever, right?
And speaking of strategies, every week I seem to have at least one conversation with an agent about leads and lead vendors. And, I get in these conversations where they're like, well, I bought these leads from so-and-so, and then I didn't have a great experience. Or I bought leads from so-and-so, and the first batch was great, and then the second and third batch just weren't the same. And then I went and tried another company, and then they're like, so Doug, do you have a company you recommend? So before I get into, my perspective on lead vendors, what do you think?
Well, here's the thing, because like, I know the Facebook ads thing is, in all reality, it is fairly simple to set up. It could take you a few hours if you've never done it before. And everyone thinks they're going to get better and cheaper leads if they get away from the lead vendor. But the reality is that we're all putting stuff out in the same marketplace. Like, we may be shrunk the marketplace that we're attacking with a strategy or a niche or whatever. But, overall, there's only so much to get in America. There's 330 million people. And so the lead vendors, like, the thing is that it's not that they're going to be better or cheaper leads. It's that you'll get the data. And if you know what to do with the data, you can eventually turn that into an advantage for you that ends up being better or cheaper, right? And so I think that from a simplicity standpoint, like, somebody who's newer, you probably should just work with the lead vendor. It's going to save you time. It's going to save you from making some costly mistakes. You can buy them in, bulk or whatever and save. And some lead vendors will let you buy them 5 or 10 at a time. That can help versus, not having the commitment of setting up infrastructure or committing an ad budget and stuff like that. But at the end of the day, what we're seeing now is the algorithms on social media are very, like, creative driven now, right? It's not like as much manual targeting as it used to be. And so once, like, a senior or somebody clicks on something related to insurance, their whole feed is kind of getting bombarded by similar offers, even if it's not the same lead vendor and they're, like, literally recycling and reselling the leads to somebody else. You're still competing against another agent most likely. And so some of the stuff is just, you're not going to get away from some of the downsides that people talk about. I think most people aren't going to say the things that I just said, right? And so the reality is that lead vendors are fine. And if you're looking at, like, I think this is just a good business principle, is you got to think more long-term, right? You can't always be looking for the quickest ROI. And one thing that I've heard a lot of really sharp business owners and marketers say is that, like, you really can't run a lot of tests. If you tweak too many things, you can't really track what it's actually improving. And so you really can only run a 90-day test 2, 3, 4 times a year. And so, if you're not willing to, stick at something for a while, you're not going to get enough data to even know if you're making that decision to change emotionally or logically. And I think that, trying 2 or 3 weeks of leads and then bailing is not conducive for success. You could get a bad batch. Like, even if you're running ads and you're putting your face on the video, which I think is going to produce the best results, they're not just opting in to get, a quote for insurance. They want to connect with you specifically. It's more personally branded, right? You're saying exactly what you want to share with them instead of not being kind of out of the loop with that as with a vendor. You're still going to have like bot traffic, where 5, 10, 20% of it isn't even good data to begin with. And you're not going to get a refund
Right.
on that like you might with a vendor. You're
That's
still going to
true.
have maybe 70 to 80% of people that don't pick up the phone the first time. So the best mindset, whether you're running, your own paid advertising or you're buying from lead vendors, I think is to think about trying to convert that lead over 6 months, right? Like, can I get enough touch points in over the long period that I can get my return on that acquisition, right? My return on that investment.
Really
And I think
squeeze
that's
the
a
life
better
out of it.
mindset.
Right. Okay. So my perspective, some similarities, a little different. My views on lead vendors and agents is if you're like, if you're new to an industry, final expense or life insurance, your IULs, to me, it does make sense. If you're sticking your toe in the water, it makes sense to purchase leads. To me, if you know your long term, I think it's important to actually have a system to either generate your own or where you have someone that's helping you to generate
I
your
agree with
own.
that.
And the reason is, in most cases, you're getting that same lead for like half the cost or less. And so, but I also think, so one thing that I know that you agree with, I also believe that you don't have to, or you shouldn't have to be all in on leads to be successful. It should be a
hmm
portion of what you do to get in
Yeah.
front of people, to have those conversations about life insurance. Now, as a final expense agent who maybe is thinking, you know what? I've been doing this for a couple of years. I'm comfortable with it, but I want to get into IUL sales. How difficult is it to go from final expense to that market?
Well, it's definitely a little bit different. But I'm gung ho on not making it a bigger deal than it is. I've had a lot of people kind of like, I could see them wrestle with that decision for months, and it's like, man, you could probably learn 90% of what you need to know to get ahead in that direction within a couple days. Like, not like literally 48 hours of you studying your ass off, but like, you could take a couple days to put a couple hours towards learning what you need to know. And obviously, if you go to a mentor or somebody that can guide you, you're gonna shortcut a lot. That's kind of the way that it worked for me. I got around some guys that are like living benefits nuts. Like, essentially, if it doesn't have 24 months terminal illness instead of 12 months, they think it's a garbage product. And I could see the mindset there.
Interesting.
It's like, if you're 18 months, diagnosed with cancer, you're terminal, right? And you got to wait 6 months to get access to some money that could potentially be life saving, or at least, increase the longevity. I mean, that's not really like a cute benefit. That's like that's life or death. And so that's something that I don't hear a lot of people talking about, that there's only a few carriers that do offer the 24-month terminal illness riders. There's only one or two that offers the critical injury instead of just critical illness, right? And so knowing things like that can be a game changer in terms of like what you should be positioning in front of the client. And realistically, if you can win on this is coverage and it's life insurance, and not try to battle the whole like it's tax free, it's indexed, all the stuff that other people are everyone's saying. Not that you shouldn't have those as points of value or whatever, but not a lot of people are leading with the living benefits angle, which is one of the main reasons why you would use IUL even over the whole life. Like, a lot of people that do banking are big on the whole life because the guarantees are stronger. I look at it like, what good does it do for you to have an extra few percent of performance if you go bankrupt 5, 10, 15 years in because you didn't have enough living benefits? And so when we talk about strategy, it's knowing like, what is a good outcome for the client? What are you trying to plan for? Not just what is a better product. It's more about seeing what products are good tools for the job we're trying to accomplish. And that's what people don't get a lot of training on, I would say. And a lot of it is just, you got to go out there and get some experience, because you don't want to be training in the classroom for very long. You want to get field experience, because then you can get paid to learn. And so there's striking a balance between putting the extra work in. And one thing that I would say is that, getting into the IUL sales is less about selling insurance, as more as it's understanding what the alternatives are, what you're competing against. Like, you kind of need to understand Roths, you need to understand IRAs, you need to understand 403bs and 401ks. You don't need to know how to like write them or every nook and cranny of them, but you need to know, what you're up against. What are you actually replacing out there? What are you kind of using the vehicle as an alternative for? Just knowing how people view those things in the marketplace and what the general mindset is and the use case of those things will help you to be able to like position yourself better, right? So a lot of the marketing that I talk about is just, saying stuff with your lips, like knowing what the talking points are. Like, it doesn't always have to be digital and mass scale and stuff like that to do marketing. Technically, everything is marketing. And so I think the biggest thing there is that, consumers are proud of themselves when they get into like a 401k or something like that. Like, they just got to the point where, even if it's been 10 years, they're at the point where they're not on the struggle bus so much anymore, right? They're actually able to save money and be more responsible. And this is like one of the best decisions they ever made. And we're kind of shooting that thing down as like, the 401k sucks, the IUL's better. And so that kind of, stings a little bit to them. And ultimately, they're looking at their 401k like it's a shiny apple. And you come in with this IUL, they never heard of it. It does all these cool things. Some of them are kind of unbelievable. And it looks like a pineapple. And they don't really know if they like pineapple, right? And so you got to get them to see it as another apple, but maybe it has like a gusher or a gummy worm or something in the middle, right? There's a extra cherry on top, but it's essentially the same thing. And if you can break through that mindset with them, you'll have a lot more success, right? It's about winning the conversation more than anything. Because if you can't generate leads, if you can't generate demand and interest in the marketplace, and you can't start to win those conversations, the setting, that you're doing, the appointments that you're running, you're not really going to get enough cracks at how to structure them and do all that stuff. But the biggest thing that I would say is you got to understand the difference between, why you would structure something to give somebody more coverage or more ability to fund it better versus going like an option B, where it's just you're stripping as much of the coverage out as possible to make it more efficient for retirement. And then we get into the banking. The banking stuff is really just about making it liquid. There's different riders that companies offer on stuff like that. And then obviously if you can throw on, a term, built into the policy, something like that, you can structure it to where, you're really, lessening the death benefit as much as possible to make it more efficient for the client. Okay. And so aside from that, the biggest thing where people get into trouble with IULs is just not funding, either a client's not funding the policy. You could tell them, you could structure it right, you could tell them how to do everything, and if they don't do it, you're still going to have, people's policies failing, right? And so a good mindset to have if you want to break into that market is that you're kind of like a financial coach. You want to be, it's less of like, wham, bam, here's your policy, ma'am, and it's more keeping up with the client. There's extra benefit of getting referrals, but it's more like continuing to stay in their corner and be an advisor. And so that can be a shift for the people that are more like sales oriented and they could want to constantly be looking for their next deal versus servicing the client. And so, if you can kind of blend your practice a little bit there, do some client appreciation events and some things that'll allow you to get more leverage from that sort of mindset and being willing to change up how you operate the business. Again, it goes a little bit away from the lead generation strategy, but it's about, all of these things. What should be planning for? How do you run the sales process? What is actually a good product for somebody? How do you change your business model to really work in that way? Like, there's a guy last month, he did $123,000 in commissions on one client. It was $468,000 in premium. He bought 3 policies. He bought a term to protect from using the IULs too soon. So he got 2 IULs in a term. One was structured for a bank, one was structured for retirement. So it was 468 in premium, but it was about 123 in target.
Wow.
So those type of deals are out there. And when you think about it, when you can make $100,000 on a client and there's no marketing cost if you're generating it through organic, and there's no chargebacks based on what you're doing with the client afterwards and how long it takes to get through, like something like that, you probably want to do like a 3 to 5 call close. You want to make sure they're educated and all that stuff. So when you look at that, it totally changes the business model. It's not like you're just selling a different product or you're generating a different type of lead. You can literally, close a couple clients a year and make six figures when you're
Wow.
using a strategy like that. And so you don't need to be on that constant chase of I need 100 leads a week or I need, 300 leads a month or whatever. And so I know I've said a lot here, but we can unpack it a little bit more. But if I could shrink like the IUL game into 5 or 10 minutes, it's really studying your stuff in those few areas.
No, that's fine. A lot of information is good on the IULs because there's more to it. You can't just go there and sell them and disappear. You've got to keep that relationship, like you said. That's really the only way to me, you're really doing it right, is by having
Mm-hmm.
that relationship, making sure that the client actually stays on top of it by staying on top of the client. And I feel like that's where like the final expense agent fails. A good final expense agent will maybe, set up a couple of automations, happy birthday, maybe, call them around the holidays, see if they want to increase or cross sell them Medicare. But I feel like, this is really a next level because first of all, you're not dealing with the final expense client. You're dealing with people that, like you said, that actually are ready to manage retirement, which is the
Mm-hmm.
opposite of our typical final expense client. Okay.
Right.
Social media platforms, organic marketing, which ones do you teach agents to use and which ones are you like pretty much staying away from?
Okay. So this is a great question. I'll give you my kind of perspective on it. They're all good, and I can teach someone all of them. I think most people are aware now, like different platforms you kind of do different things on. But I'm going to have you look at like this. TikTok and YouTube are really great for scalability because the reach on there is great, but they're not the best place to start, right? It's those are for more advanced people, right? Um, And the reason I say that is you could get a bunch of leads on YouTube, you could get a bunch of views and a bunch of people in your comments, but people don't really DM each other back and forth on YouTube. Not that you can't, but it's just the culture there is different,
Right.
right? And so you can't really run a sales process to extract your leads. So the best way to run one of those channels is to have really compelling content that makes people want to book self book a call, which we all know is going to be a lower conversion ratio than you reaching out to them, you kind of facilitating the sales process. And so for that reason, I have people look at like a Facebook or a LinkedIn, maybe even an Instagram. And my thing here is that Instagram is kind of like the highlight reel. Like, most people are just showing highlights on there. It's not as authentic as something like Facebook. Like on Facebook, you can still see people like bitching and stuff like that, like complaining about something dumb that happened to them or the drama, their friend or their ex did
Political
or
stuff.
whatever. It's more authentic in that way. So you can read your people and connect with them and stuff like that. And if you're marketing on the platform, and you know how to format your stuff, it feels more genuine as well, which is super important that not everything looks like an advertisement when you're doing organic. Um, I have a lot of people that they look at it like, oh, there's more rich people on LinkedIn or I can use, I can get people's emails and stuff. And so there is some benefit to that with like Sales Navigator and Ulink and these kind of different things built for LinkedIn, but they have cracked down. You are more limited on how many connection requests you can send per day. And I've noticed that people are generally less active on LinkedIn, number one. And I call it the land of the suits. Like it's literally like a resume platform. And so people kind of put their best foot forward. It has the same energy as as an Instagram does. So I'm big on Facebook. Facebook is also more, let's say, friendly to the like video content, which is kind of a low hanging fruit for a lot of people. I'm not saying you have to do video to make it work, for social media as an advisor, but it's definitely low hanging fruit because, any kid that started at Primerica last week can sound sharper than you or I if he knows what he's doing with like AI and ChatGPT and stuff like that. But you can't really fake the funk and real value. Like if you can get on and talk about real value back and forth, like Doug and I are here, that's going to set you apart. I think that in the future, there's going to be a big comeback for seminars and things like that because you'll be able to kind of separate yourself from, essentially the imposters out there that can just put the content out, right? And so being able to get on video, learning public speaking, these are still going to be really great skills. And as far as like I'm gung ho about Facebook, right? You can do live videos on there. You can do stories on there. You can literally see who the viewers are on your videos if you're using stories. So if somebody's watching a long form stuff in your stories, guess who you should probably reach out to? You don't need to have commission breath and reach out to them the same day, but I'd make a mental note of like, okay, this guy Johnny's watched my 12-minute rant on living benefits. He's watched 3 of these videos now. What I can give you here is that if somebody's watching something like that, you either nailed the topic or they care about your opinion on something, both of which are really good for you, right? And so you want to think about tracking social media. A lot of people don't really know how to track if it's working well, because in general, I would say financial services is, I don't know if taboo is the right word, but it's one of those kind of topics that you're probably not going to get hundreds of people telling you how much is in their 401k underneath your post or your video. So you kind of got to know how to watch people and what to look for to understand the health and the level of priority in your pipeline, and then have a good strategy on the back end for reaching out to them. And so what I like about Facebook and LinkedIn and Instagram is you can run all 4 steps of a good marketing process on platform, meaning you can build your list, you can send your connection requests, your follows, your friend requests, you can nurture people, you can comment on their stuff publicly, build up your know, like, and trust factor, build that relationship up. You can do your content, so you can put your sales material out, you can shift beliefs, you can handle objections, pre-handle those things, you can make offers, and you can also run a sales process in the DMs. You can qualify people, you can do appointment setting. It's harder to do that on these other platforms, right? Because they just don't offer the same amount of features. So to like raise your bottom line, a Facebook or a LinkedIn would probably be your best bet to get your first 20, 30, 60 appointments a month. Beyond that, you probably want to start looking at either doing multiple platforms or going all in on one of these other platforms that's more reach and algorithm centric related to the content, where you're trying to go for more inbound and less outbound. Or, you can do ads, right? I'm actually a fan of, like, once you hit that kind of critical mass point, just going for ads, because you should know your marketing angles. You should have enough research on what you're trying to accomplish by then that you could probably just run a budget, and you're looking to get your time back from things anyways. But there's not really a right or wrong with if you should go omnipresent or do ads or whatever. I mean, the best of the best people do everything. They're on like 20 different marketing channels. They're just bombarding the marketplace and retargeting them. But, obviously you can't start out with something like that with a lower degree of experience and skill set and budget and stuff like that. So I'm big on focusing on getting one channel to work. And if I was going to go with anything, I'd go all in on Facebook. Because like you could start a YouTube channel and it's a better long-term strategy, but it's hard to get your first 2,000 views per video on YouTube. And so if you never get that initial traction to let the algorithm take off and share it to more people, you're going to have a hard time. But if you can develop 2,500, 3,500 loyal, audience members on Facebook or something like that, you can easily start to kind of migrate them over and then work on a new channel that can give you more long-term leverage.
Yep. And look, that's great stuff. And so it's funny, you mentioned YouTube. I'm going to share an interesting experience. I guess it's kind of a brag point. So I've got a business colleague. He's a downline agent with his own agency, and he decided, hey, I want to really start recruiting. And so I've been working with him on how to get his YouTube channel going. He's been doing it for less than 30 days, and he's already got 2,500 subs.
It's pretty damn good.
I'm like, dude, it's kind of pissing me off. I'm like, man,
yeah.
I'm not getting that. Well, how is this happening? But he's just putting the pedal to the metal. He took everything that we talked about. He just takes it to heart and does it. It's like, it's not a suggestion, it's a must. And I feel like that's, with the systems, stuff that we teach, the successful agents are the ones that are doing that. They're taking the suggestions to heart. Do me a favor and kind of briefly walk me through the process that you use to teach agents and agency owners how to grow.
Well, the first thing I'll say is you got to get the marketing strategy and the business strategy aligned. So I'll give you an example of, like, technically when you put these pieces together, what my system does for people is essentially it's an appointment setting engine, right? It just gives them a little bit more leverage from, I'm big on organic, so it has less fixed cost than like the ads out the gate. is a little bit more towards personal branding. So the lead quality, the retention's a little bit higher, but it is more skill set driven in the beginning, right? And so I was talking to a Primerica guy about a month ago, and he's at like a 50% comp. He doesn't have the securities license yet.
Right.
And a guy like that, I'm going to have to give him a lot more appointments than the guy who can do AUM or somebody who can roll over annuities, right? I might be able to make that guy 20, 30K a month with 2 appointments a month. The Primerica guy is going to probably have to run 30 or 40 appointments to make the same kind of comp. So it doesn't mean don't be a Primerica guy. It just means you have to align yourself to a strategy, right? And so the first thing that I always look at is we got to consider those things. Like if somebody's got a downline of 1,000 agents, but only 97 of them are producing, his strategy for growth needs to look different than the guy who's got only 10 agents, but all of them are killers. They're all writing, 20, 30 grand a month, right? And
Right.
so part of it is looking at how can we optimize what they've already got going on based on their IMO, based on their culture and their kind of strong suits and what they want to be doing, what their preferences are. What can we package together to give them an outside advantage? And so, that's probably the area that is just less, it's more customized for everyone. There's no just like, pick this and run with it. It's very, out the gate, 100% where it needs to be. But aside from that, I basically just focus on those 4 things that I mentioned with Facebook, right? Is we got to build the list. We got to nurture the lists. We got to put some content out, and we got to do some appointment setting. That's where I'll start with anyone. If we can put 30 minutes in those buckets, or we can set like a KPI for each of those, that's really going to be kind of where I start with somebody. Some people are better off like, call it mental or whatever. It's better to maybe not have a KPI, like let's do 30 outbound a day or 50 outbound a day or whatever. It's better to just have them commit to a time chunk that they're going to do the activity for that amount of time. But that's kind of where I start. And essentially we look at reorienting who their avatar is, right? Who are you targeting, right? Because what you say to somebody who's, already at retirement age and they're looking at problems related to, retired minimum distributions is different than what you say to 25-year-old who doesn't have a family and you're trying to convince them the value of getting insurance, right? And it's not that one's right or wrong. It's just, the leverage packed into the messaging and positioning. What is your targeting strategy? Going back to what I said about the IMO and the organization size and what somebody's general preference is, right? We kind of got to align all those pieces together. And then it's just the system's a system. In my system, it's just DMs and writing content rather than, pounding the phones and spending money on ads or leads. But you got to do the work. There's still an activity level related to, getting results. And obviously the more you put in, the better you get at the skills, the faster you can kind of get a return and compound results and stuff like that. And so at the end of the day, it's just like, are you doing the things? Like I'll have people, I'd say the number one thing that people got to do to win with my system is they got to be willing to be accountable and vulnerable with like sharing what they're saying to people in the DMs, like screenshotting, hey, what should I say if they're saying this? Like we got to make sure they're running a proper sales process. And then at the advanced level, it's more of greasing the wheels, which, I consider to be like a workflow and efficiency thing. Like, can I get 20 to 30% of the audience that day coming inbound on a consistent basis versus outbound so we can save some of the formalities in the chat, right? So we can create lead magnets and some different things to get people coming to you, right? So I call that entry points into the creative sales process. Like, when I'm recruiting agents and stuff like that, I know that if somebody requests my sales script, unless they're just nosy about what I'm saying differently, they probably want to make more sales. They probably want to find new ways to up their game there. So I can kind of skip to questions related to that area and less of the formalities, right? And so it's the same with the consumer marketplace. Like if you're doing lead magnets related to debt or, living benefits, you can create an entry point that might give you an outsized return, or you have a better, you have better context points for that conversation than something you haven't studied as well, or maybe the product line, the group you're with isn't running as much. And so I get pretty nerdy with it in terms of like how deep we go and how nuanced we put all the stuff together. But that's why I say the zone of genius that I operate from is brand, messaging, and positioning. And if we simplify that, your positioning is like your advice to somebody who's at a certain age range and in a situation compared to the Primerica guy, right? Okay, we're not going to buy term and invested difference because then you're going to be 50 years old, 60 years old and have no coverage, and you might live to age 100, right? In my mind, that would be a mistake. I get that there's probably a way that the insurance, the Primerica guy could probably spin it to where his angle sounds just as good. That's all positioning. Like if you haven't mastered the positioning for the stuff you want to sell and for the company and the group you work with, you got to understand those points, because technically anybody can come behind you and tech your client, even if it's not technically what's in their best interest, if they know how to position it correctly. Right?
Okay. So with that being said, I'm, I'm speaking with a lot of agents, and I'm having these conversations with agents that have been in the industry, life insurance industry, for years. They've been with multiple agencies, and here they are talking to me about, possibly working with me. And to me, when you're at that point where you're going to jump from one agency to a next, that to me, there's some type of a fail going on. Why do you
Mm-hmm.
think the agent failure is as high as it is for life insurance agents?
Well, it's really a few different parties, right? The first thing that I think we just got to address is that I don't want to say that a lot of people are lazy, but obviously, like the thing is mediocrity scales further than excellence, right? And so, like, you don't have to be cliche, but you got to be dedicated to excellence and have a good work ethic. And you like common sense is you got to put a lot of effort into things until you have a skill set that puts you to where you don't have to do that. Like I was having a conversation with a lady last week, and she was like, I'm trying to get clients from my stuff, and I keep just getting agents seeing all my stuff. What should I do about it? I'm like, well, in the last 48 hours, what have you done? What kind of effort have you put into making sure that that's not what's happening? She's like, well, I haven't done anything. I'm like, well, imagine you sent 1,000 new friend requests to people that weren't insurance agents. You'd probably make a dent in changing the ratio there. I'm not saying it has to be 1,000. I'm just saying, like, picture that kind of work ethic. Like, what would it look like for me to for sure get a different result in the direction I want? I think you have to adopt that mindset as an agent with any kind of pathway you're going to run on. Like, if you guys know Jocko Willink is, like extreme accountability, like you got to do what's necessary to get results. Sometimes your best isn't good enough. Sometimes you got to do what's required. The second thing is that I think where the industry is failing agents is a lot of these IMOs, bigger agencies, and even the carriers, they're kind of scaling these agents as sales reps, but they're expecting them to be an independent business owner because they're kind of compensating them at that level, which is not really wrong. They're not wrong for wanting the agent to be responsible and do a lot of stuff themselves, but they're not providing enough support and training and tools and like enablement for that person to operate as an independent business owner. They're kind of like, come in, we have the leads, we have the scripts. And I don't want to look at it as just blatant. We know there's bad and good people out there or whatever, and people will stride the gray line, but I don't want to look at it like it's malicious or intentionally like omitting this stuff. I think maybe people just don't think about it as deeply as they need to when they're positioning themselves and the opportunity they have for agents. But the reality is that people are feeling kind of bamboozled, right? They're feeling like it's not lining up. They said they were going to get this and then they didn't or whatever. And so the best way to do marketing, whether you're marketing for talent or you're marketing for the consumer, for the services, is that just be honest, right? Just share a lot of material, be honest. None of this like, hey, you can work an hour a day and make 20 grand a month, whatever type stuff. Like, I hate the photos of people like, working from home on the beach and like they're showing their submit numbers and not their issued numbers. They don't talk about how much they spend on leads. It's like, you can do that, and sure, you can bring people in from their 9 to 5. But the reality is that if you're not getting those people turning into producers and it's just not lining up, the expectations weren't set correctly. You're bringing somebody in expecting it to be a cakewalk and positioning like that for them, and then on the inside you want to train them on how hard it is. If you could just position it like it's going to be hard and put all the criteria out so they know they're in alignment with what they're actually going to look like on the back end, you're going to get better results. You're going to have less ratio of people falling off, not putting the work in, meeting your core values and all the stuff, right? And so it's the same thing on the consumer side. Like, this is more on the Medicare and the health side, but there's a lot of like clickbait type marketing where they're like, hey, you get a government grant and this and that. And people are interested in the giveaways and the stuff like that and not really interested in talking to somebody about insurance. You can do that and get a bunch of leads and clicks, but when we talk about the difference between getting a lead and a client, it's like would you rather get 200 leads a month and have to sort through all the trash to close 5 or 10 people, or would you rather get 12 leads and close 8 of them? Because you can do that, right? And that's probably more of a business model shift than just a shift to the marketing. But the same applies on the talent side and the consumer side, right? And it just comes down to setting better expectations with what people are getting involved in, so that you can control the lead quality in a better way. There's less explaining to do on the back end. There's more transparency. Bring that marketing forward, and then just sort through the data differently, right? Because number one, you get all your time back if you're not doing multiple conversations and all this stuff, right? So I think that the industry is essentially failing people on that expectation front of like, hey, we're going to do all these things for you, but actually not really. There's still a lot of stuff missing for you to be able to accomplish what we said you're going to be able to accomplish. And, it's just, they're not wrong. Like, they are huge companies. If they're 8, 9 figures, 10 figures, right? They do kind of need to look at these people as a sales rep, but that expectation needs to be like, hey, this isn't copy and paste, just buy the leads. The numbers look the same all the time. It sounds good on paper. And the reality is, when you're that big, you probably do want people to just bring you their numbers every week.
Lots of good stuff, Nick. Thank you so much for your time today. I'm going to be in touch, man. We're going to talk again.
Okay. I look forward to it. It's been a good show. Thanks for having me on.
Absolutely.